Well, first off, some apologies because I wanted to get this much earlier, but I've been working through all my feelings with Revenge of the Sith. And just to me, this is probably one of the weaker of the three films we have in the prequel trilogy. And I'll go laying out the reasons why, and I just don't want to repeat what's been said before by some people who really just don't like the prequels, such as the bad acting, the stiff dialogue, the plot and pacing make no sense. It looks horrible, and so on and so forth. I mean, I think those are valid points, but I don't think they really get at the heart of why people do like them or not like them. Because, again, those people who really like the Revenge of the Sith and the end of the prequels usually also give really bad reasons. Well, it's really dark. At least it's consistent. It's no longer has a lot of Jar Jar. It's very superficial reasons on both sides as to why Revenge of the Sith is pretty good or it's pretty bad. It's not really, I think, an analytic take on this final chapter. I will say that it seems like I'm paralleling a lot of these criticisms because I do think there is something problematic the way Hayden is just performing Anakin. We just never really get a good sense of why he's doing what he does. We get a much better sense of why Palpatine is acting the way he is doing and how he's manipulating everything and the events, but we don't really understand why Anakin turns so quickly. So there's still like a lot of gaps in the story that isn't really made up much later. Added to this, there's some just odd things with even the thematic pattern in terms of what Lucas set up. Let me just start off strongly in the good points, that there is a lot of consistency in terms of the greed-compassion theme. There's actually a cut scene with Qui-Gon Jinn that emphasizes this, but for whatever reason, George cut that out. So the greed-compassion theme is still very strong in this film. There's also a lot of consistency in terms of the colors, right? The colors are mainly purple. Even Mace's lightsaber is purple colored because it's sort of like a midway between blue and red. And so there's a lot more going on with the symbolism than people might think. And so I think the purple and the way it's ambiguous, I mean, even Palpatine dresses in purple with his hood and cloak is very, very well done. So again, in terms of the symbolism and the deeper themes, there is a lot of consistency and a lot of things that are good. But once we get beyond that, the strong points are mainly Palpatine's really effective scenes with Anakin, especially the opera scene, which is very well applauded, and I'm not going to go against that. I do think it works pretty well as thickening the mythology with Darth Plagueis. But once we get, aside from those very strong scenes, the complaints I think are very legitimate. Like, why Anakin is still in love with Padme is not explained. Padme is very active. If you see the deleted scenes, she does a lot more, but again, if you went with the theatrical cut, you would be pretty puzzled as to what is Padme up to? How is she not, understanding this deep change in Anakin? I mean, aside from a few dialogue scenes with him, how is she not alerted to what is going on in his psychology? So there's a lot of things that just don't make a lot of sense and are missing. And for whatever reason, Lucas chooses to emphasize, I think more weak elements. For instance, the beginning fight with Grievous actually takes an hour long, and what we get is a very truncated version of what was supposed to be a much longer sequence. But you're like, what was the point of the sequence? Is it to make Anakin more of a hero? Is it to point his worth in the Clone Wars? Is it to get rid of Dooku? It just seems he had a lot of odd elements. Now, I understand what he was trying to do. He's trying to have this running conversation with other filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, Stanley Kubrick. I've noted that already. I'm not going to re-emphasize that again, but obviously there's a lot of Kubrick in this film as well, with, humanity being destroyed by technology and, the machine taking over the man and that kind of thing. But, for instance, there's this part where Sidious makes that big speech at the end declaring the Empire officially, and that has a very Godfather feel, which Lucas admits to. So there's a lot of interesting conversation he's having with his past influences. But, again, cinematically, I think Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones even did a lot better job of doing this. And I might say I'm just taking a political criticism because, Attack of the Clones had an anti-war, anti-Iraq war theme, and Phantom Menace has this kind of pro-environmentalist theme. But I have to be honest, just in terms of me personally, I found the environmentalist stuff, when I saw it in 1999, pretty offensive. I just didn't like it. I thought it was very distracting for him to start lecturing about biology. And Attack of the Clones, I honestly didn't notice it in 2002. I did notice the final shots seemed to be very much about Iraq, but, aside from that, I was like, I'm not clear where you're going with this. So it's not my own political bias, it's just aesthetically, I wasn't quite in tune with what episode 1 and 2 are doing. But looking back at it now, I can see that they have much stronger elements. But Revenge of the Sith, ironically, which most people think is the strongest of the three, seems to be the weakest because the structure and story just aren't really doing a good job of resonating the theme. Stylistically, I understand what's going on. I mean, right, Natalie looks like Leia. She has the hair buns. We see, a Wookiee, Chewbacca even, doing this Tarzan swing, and then we see him doing it in Return of the Jedi. And we see a lot of neat little things that he's playing with. The two Jedi at the beginning. That's sort of like the beginning of Phantom Menace, right? But now they're full-fledged Jedi Knights. So there's a lot of playing with structure. R2-D2 sees Anakin's fall as Darth Vader. And, of course, R2-D2 is at the beginning of Star Wars in 1977. So there's a lot of neat little ways that the parallels are being played with, ironically. One of the best ones I found was like when Palpatine touches Anakin's forehead as he becomes basically Darth Vader when his body's been destroyed, and that mirrors what happens with Obi-Wan with Luke in Star Wars 1977. So there's a lot of neat little parallels where he's being more ironic and playful than he was in the other episodes. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it unifies correctly, either because of Hayden's performance, and again, I don't think he's a bad actor. I just don't think the performance makes sense in terms of what he's trying to do. And the stylistic touches are nice, but they seem to be still vague. They're like, what is this going toward? What does this really mean? I understand George intended this to be about Palpatine, but again, I have to agree with a lot of the audience. I was like, well, isn't this supposed to be about the fall of the Jedi? And really all that happens off screen. We really see them eliminated really quickly in 5 minutes. And you're like, this is what the whole saga was about. But again, for him, the saga was not about that. It was about Palpatine seducing Anakin and using him as a tool for his new empire, and how Anakin falls for the deception, his greed, at least to George, for wanting to control and love Padme. Because again, to George, this is a form of greed. He does not really try to care about Padme. He wants to control her. So I understood that, and that comes off pretty strongly. But I have to say, overall, it just doesn't feel right. Grievous comes off as way too stupid, and he's eliminated way too easily. It just doesn't make sense in terms of the plot. Why Obi-Wan and Anakin are separated. It's just too artificial so that, Palpatine can seduce him. It just seems like a lot of little things didn't quite add up. And even if it is supposed to sort of echo or mirror the original trilogy, it actually creates a lot of plot problems and paradoxes. For instance, the way Leia is born does not make sense with the Return of the Jedi. And I've had arguments with people, but apparently they don't care or haven't looked closely. But it would seem the most logical thing I can come up with is that Leia is the daughter of a Force user, but not Padme. Again, according to the film. So there's just a lot of things, Yoda knows Chewie, Obi-Wan presumably knows Chewie. This doesn't really make sense with the original trilogy. So there's a lot of things that you're trading off in terms of the continuity, and you're not gaining anything in terms of the storytelling. So overall, I do agree with the consensus. Yes, there's a lot of more consistency in tone in terms of the darkness, but I thought what was interesting about the first two episodes is the back and forth between the light and dark themes. Here, it just seems like the darkness themes is honestly done for more market purpose reasons. It doesn't really make sense in terms of cohesion, at least not to me. So again, a very great film, a lot of powerful, interesting moments, a lot of little great sequences, but I have to believe that this is really the weakest of the PT and probably one of the lower ranking Star Wars films. But I don't want to be dogmatic about it, and I'm going to look at the deeper elements and go into more in depth in terms of my criticisms as well as my praise of little elements. But I just felt like with Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, I can see what I missed earlier. But here, it just seems like what I thought was wrong in the first place is still there. It just doesn't really do a good job of being the final chapter of what it's supposed to be. Or those are my thoughts of the matter at the moment. So this has been Star Wars Analyzed on Revenge of the Sith as the final concluding chapter of the prequel trilogy. Star Wars Analyzed, please be safe, thank you. If you like the content, please hit the like button and or subscribe. Star Wars Analyzed on Revenge of the Sith. Thank you for listening.